Drew here, and I really enjoyed Season 3, Episode 8 of For All Mankind, titled And Here's to You. I think that this season is picking up steam as it goes into the back half for sure, and I think that it's starting to do the kinds of things that I feel like it would have been really nice if it could have been doing from the beginning and throughout this season. But I'm sure that the next two episodes are going to really take off, and from that perspective I am still very, very excited to watch this show on a weekly basis because it has picked up steam over the course of the season. I don't feel like the first season was as slow as on the takeoff as this season has been, so I don't really feel like this is a necessary trade-off. I feel like this season has spent way too long on unnecessary subplots that didn't really add a lot, but I still really enjoyed this episode, so I'm excited to see where things go. That cliffhanger, man, I think that it was really a unique way for this to play out. A lot of you who have been saying that this show was advocating for far-right militarism, do you still think that? I think it was pretty obvious to me from the beginning that it was portraying far-right militarism, but it was kind of leaving it up to the audience how you feel about far-right militarism. And now this episode they've shown, where far-right militarism can lead to the deaths of some innocent Russian cosmonauts who were shot down due to really nothing more than a communication error when the astronauts couldn't figure out what they were going for in the crate. And the way that this sequence played out, it was very tense. I honestly thought that the Russians might have weapons. It's unclear at this point if they do or if they don't. Like, a lot of the ridiculousness of claiming territory and saying, oh, we've got here first, so this is ours, it seems kind of normal when you're looking at Earth and you have people with, their established boundaries, and this is where this country ends and where this one ends and where this one begins. But once you get onto the moon and you see these countries claiming territory and saying, this is our territory and that's, we claim that, and it just starts to seem a little bit more ridiculous, especially since due to lack of oxygen and other issues, you really can't hold an area, and there's not really much you can do with it other than, exist there for a brief window of time inside an astronaut suit. But the way that this played out, I wondered, do the Russians have weapons? Are they going to shoot them? And it was very, very tense throughout this scene, the way that they shot it from the astronauts' perspective as they approached the cosmonauts. And you could understand why they would be frightened and why they reacted the way that they did shooting the cosmonauts. They definitely put you inside the astronauts' heads. They showed you that they're not bad people. They're just in a tense situation kind of brought on by the decisions of their leaders. And just the horror, though, of what happened to these cosmonauts after they were shot. The one who's had a fire go on inside his suit, which burned him to death. Just the horror of that. And it was very clear to me that this was not intended to be glorified at all. And if you've been saying that this show was glorifying far-right militarism, I don't know really how you can say that this scene was meant to show that in a positive light at all. So the repercussions of this are going to be really fascinating to see play out. I think the rest of the season, like I said, it's really going to take off. There have been so many, pieces laid for peace between the two nations, between Margot and Sergei, and now how everything will go and how if things will fall through and what the consequences of that. Last episode we saw the Russians carry out an aggressive military action that resulted in the death of Thomas Paine. In this episode we see the Americans killing two innocent cosmonauts. So things are just escalating, and it'll be interesting to see how far out of control they get. I mentioned Margot and Sergei. I feel that this relationship has been really interesting. I wish that they weren't taking it in a romantic direction, as it becomes apparent that they're doing this episode. Clearly, romance between these characters is all but impossible. And as much as I can understand, it seems reasonable. They connected in a believable way, because they're both coming from similar perspectives in a certain sense, and that they're both people representing their governments, and they're trying to be able to work together and accomplish something, that they both think is important for, that goes beyond countries, but, politics keep getting in the way. And, you could understand from that perspective how they would have a lot to bond over, and you can see how that they've earned each other's trust, and now they're in this position where everything seems like it could come tumbling down due to circumstances beyond their control. And I'm really interested to see how this all plays out. Otherwise, this episode, we had a lot of interesting little things move forward a little bit. I feel that, again, I've really, really enjoyed the plot line with Kelly Baldwin. Cynthia Wu, again, deserves tons of credit for her performance. I really, really felt emotional as she met this person who turned out to be her half-sister, and as she watched her father, who is this cook in this restaurant, and knowing that, he has moved to the U.S. and he's left his roots behind, and that he doesn't even know that it's her, and realizing, this complication in her identity, that she's never really known who her real birth parents were, and to not know how to approach him and how this is going to play out. I think it's pretty interesting stuff. Again, maybe not the sci-fi stuff some people are here for, but I think this is a better plot line for this show. Otherwise, we have Karen follow through on having an affair with Danny Stevens, and man, I don't care about this plot line. And also I just think it's so stupid. Like, it's one of the creepiest romances I've seen on television, because the fact that this was someone who, used to be her son's age, and, she was like a mother figure to him, and, I feel like there's some extent where you wonder whether there's not some element in which she's trying to find that connection with her own son again, with Danny, and that this is like this sexual connection is born out of that. I just find it really, really disturbing and creepy, and I wish the writers hadn't gone there. And this is one of those soap opera plots that I really wish the show would just avoid altogether. I also felt, the scene where Tracy and Gordo interact on the moon, I am rooting for these characters. I will admit, again, this isn't a plot line that, is necessary, but I do enjoy it. And I'm interested to see, how they're going to resolve it. It feels too easy at this point because, you've got Gordo. He gave her his speech about how he told her husband he was going to win her back. And she said, well, do you think you're going to do that? And he essentially repeated what her husband had said. And she had a more positive reaction to this than I would have necessarily expected. I had felt like she had some longing for him this season, but for the most part, I still just kind of felt like she had moved on and she wasn't really going to come back to this relationship. But it seems as though there is some part of her that is interested to see if he can win her back, as she says, try and catch me. So that moment, to me, it was kind of a touching moment in their relationship. I don't, think that they're going to go with the obvious resolution of them getting back together. So I'm kind of curious to see what's going to be the problem that will cause their relationship to break apart. In some ways, she has turned into the person that he used to be, and he has become a different person, and it's going to be interesting to see, they have changed, but have they changed in a way that they will be able to actually make their relationship work were they to get back together? And is that something that Tracy wants? We know Gordo wants it, but is it what she really wants when it comes down to it? Or does she want, to continue on a different path? So that, to me is a plot line that I'm interested to see how they resolve it, because I feel like there's lots of ways that this could resolve that would be rather obvious. I'm hoping that they don't resolve it by killing one of them. That would not be my ideal resolution to this. The kerfuffle between Bill and Elita, I found this to be kind of frustrating. I think it gave us more insight into both their characters, but in terms of like the maturity of the way that they interacted and what was actually resolved, it all seemed kind of like just a pointless skirmish that didn't need to happen. And I can't believe that he actually like threatened to quit over her saying what she said. To me, this just seems like, I get that he's like an immature man-child in some ways, but to me, like, surely she's not the first person to be disrespectful to him. And if someone was disrespectful to you and you had as much clout as he does, well, surely then you would push for the other person to get fired and not like act like you're going to quit yourself. I feel like they only had him act like he was going to quit himself because if he had actually asked for her to be fired, then that would have come off as unlikable, and they didn't want to go there. But I find, I get that she has a tough background. We get more insight into this episode, learning that she actually was, what she went through, Elita, as she had nowhere to live, and she was living in people's backyards and going from place to place, just trying to find ends meet, and always in fear as an illegal immigrant, and that she got shot at one point. But she really did not come off as very likable for the vast majority of this episode to me. Her interaction with Margot, where, she got indignant and angry when Margot said, "You owe me this much." When I really do feel like, yes, you can argue, well, I don't owe you, but if someone helps you to get a job that you really want to do, then yeah, you should show them some deference and some respect. That's just common sense. And for her to get indignant about that, I feel like, yeah, I'm sure she's upset that Margot didn't take her in, but Margot wasn't required to do that. So I don't know. This interaction didn't make her endeared to me. I thought that her scene with Bill on the whole, like, she came off as more likable there, and I think that, to a certain extent, her willingness to show maturity and, try to hold on to a job by being willing to go to Bill and to let him, know some of the stuff that's been in her life, and to listen as he kind of described this moment that was really interesting to hear from the perspective. Something you don't often hear in these shows is the perspective of people in the control room, and how, he wasn't able to leave the room for hours, and he peed his pants because he was trying to make sure that Neil Armstrong and this other astronaut survived, and just the tension that he would feel knowing that their lives could very well be in his hands. That was, an interesting thing to reveal. But again, what did these stories really have to do with the issues between these two characters? Yeah, they gave both of them some insight into each other, but the relation was a little tangential at best from my perspective. And, this was one of the weaker scenes in the episode for me personally. Lastly, Molly Cobb. I thought, what we're seeing her go through this episode as she finally admits to her husband that she, has this radiation and that she may not survive. This is a slowly developing plot line that I expected there to be fallout from, no pun intended, a lot more quickly. And the fact that it's taken so long to get to this point where we're finally seeing, that she's going blind and she's having all these other, physical issues, when they've kind of ignored it for, the vast majority of the season. I would have liked to see some more immediate follow-up. But I guess the one thing to this show's credit is that they're not rushing through it, that they are taking the time to show how it's gradually creeping up on her and gradually pushing her out of this passion, this thing that is her passion that she's no longer going to be able to do. I thought the scene where she flew the plane and was just enjoying that exhilaration and the way that scene played out, it was a really good visual representation of her emotional state at this moment as she's trying to cling to, her freedom and to be able to do the things that she loves to do as a pilot and as someone who has been an astronaut for as long as possible, because this is what she's passionate about. She didn't want to be a wife or a mother. She wanted to do this, and now she's losing out on this due to, a decision that she made that was a very heroic decision. So this is compelling stuff from my perspective. So on the whole, I really enjoyed this episode. I think the rest of the season is going to be really, really interesting. If I have one complaint, I feel like the incident with the astronauts and the cosmonauts at the end of this episode felt like an inciting incident. And I know they couldn't really have it happen in the first episode or even in the second episode. There was a lot of groundwork to lay for it. But I really would have preferred them to have it happen earlier in the season. I would have preferred for this to be something that had all the fallout going on throughout the season. Because I think 2 episodes, even if they're supersized episodes, like this episode was an hour and 10 minutes, which is the length of some movies, So these are longer episodes, I'm sure, that we're going to be seeing even in the last two. They could even be as long as 90 minutes, potentially. But to me, I feel that that's still not enough time to deal with the fallout of these cosmonauts' deaths. And I'm hopeful that at least that they'll play this incident out, the aftermath and the ramifications of it, for, as long as they need to, even if that bleeds into season 3 and is still going on. So those are just my thoughts for what they are worth. Let me know what you thought in the comments. If you're interested in seeing my upcoming reviews of other shows, please consider subscribing. And as always, thanks for watching.